Games you deserve.
Welcome to Games You Deserve, brought to you by Special Reserve Games. This week, we hear more of your video game remake ideas, plus we tell our E3 stories and wrap things up with part 4 of Fireflower. Hey, we got some more emails from some of the folks listening out there, the podcast fans. Or do we call them? Are they fans?
People still send emails, huh? I
guess. I got a text or a page on my pager the other day.
Oh, really? Was it your dealer?
It was. Yeah, it was really weird because they just sent 143, and
right. Mine always just say 911, 911, 911. All that over and over again. That usually meant get home. I didn't have a pager. What are we talking about?
Exactly.
So we got some emails from the email machine.
Yeah, let me read one of these off here. So this is from Mark. It's Guy Man stuff on Discord. And he says, hey. Hello, Erik. It was fun checking out Shadow Warrior 2 blood splatter differences the other day in Discord. Before I go any further, Smitty, you want to explain that one? Because some people might not get that.
Well, sometimes we hurt people, and sometimes there's blood. No, on Shadow Warrior 2, which was actually the pre-Special Reserve Games as a company Special Reserve version of Shadow Warrior 2 that was done directly for Devolver by me, was also the first time we had done a randomization of a vector layer. We've done a randomization of blood splatter on every single copy of Shadow Warrior 2. So not only did the sequential numbers all designate an individual, type of copy, also the blood splatter lets you to have a truly original, unique print of each one of the games. And so we were trying to prove a little bit that this really was happened, that this had happened, that we really did produce these kinds of, so we started posting pictures in Discord of our different blood splatter patterns of our games.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun to share.
Long explanation there. Sorry about that.
Oh, no. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's really cool about those boxes is that literally every single one is truly unique. So he goes on to say, thank you guys for being awesome and doing what you do. I love our community on Discord, which is great. So if you haven't joined the Discord, do so. Discord.gg/Special Reserve Games. Games I'd like to see remastered. And this is cool because we've talked about at least one of these games. He says, well, Simcopter is probably highest on my list, followed by Streets of SimCity and SimCity 2000, which I know Smitty had mentioned when we were talking about SimCity. He said another would be the original Serious Sam, which I played a ton of at LAN parties in his high school media center. Boy, that brings it back. And he says, by the way, I'll be checking the mintiness of Fetch really soon. Haha. Then I'll send it off to my folks in Florida to give to Brownie, our pup. And he sent a nice little photo of the pupper here.
My Uncle Gordon and Aunt Joyce had a dog named Brownie up in Abilene, Kansas.
There you go. So what do you think of the Sim City or all the Sim choices in that?
I hate it. No, to everything he said. No, move on. I mean, yeah, excellent ideas. Like everything he said was just, it's when you say remake or a reserve or a physical copy or collector's edition, the one thing that always just kind of hurts my heart is that PC has such a small market for collectibles. And I think we've talked about this once or twice before. So, like Streets of SimCity or SimCity 2000. I don't think of SimCity 2000 as a console game.
It really wasn't.
Oh, God, no. It's a PC game.
It's a PC game. So what would we make it on? Not on Switch. We would make it on for PC, we'd probably put it on a DVD, and holy crap, we'd probably have to put a thumb drive in there just so you could install it on 90% of the new laptops. They have no DVD drives. They have no disk drive at all.
But let's move on to the next one. This one came from Brendan. He says, "Hi, Erik. Just want to say great work with the podcast. I've been enjoying tuning in so far. You are all offering a great perspective on the medium and wider industry. To cut to the chase, the game that I want remade would be Extreme G. Perhaps an oddball choice, but this is a game I fondly remember from my childhood. I miss publishers like Acclaim that publish solid games and that gave a new spin on established formulas. I always thought Extreme G was a fun spin on Wipeout with a fantastic multiplayer battle that took inspiration from Mario Kart." So
That's fair. That's very accurate. I think that's a good idea.
if I look at where the Switch is, for instance, today, we've got a smattering of racing games, but I really haven't seen anything recently that kind of really hits that note that Wipeout or Extreme G or anything along those lines hits. That kind of arcadey, hard and fast race. It doesn't come across in too many of them. I think the only one where I get even close to that right now that I really like is Horizon Chase Turbo. PM Studios put that out, and they've done a pretty nice job there. But it's kind of that arcadey feel of racer. It doesn't really exist as much as the realistic stuff. Once Gran Turismo came out on the PlayStation, there was a huge push for realistic. Yeah.
It can't all be pole position.
I had much more fun with Wipeout and Need for Speed and those kinds of games. I mean, Need for Speed is more realistic, but I still enjoy that aspect of it than the realism of Gran Turismo.
Well, we talked about Daytona, one of the other ones, and that's very arcade style. It's not realistic at all, but
come on,
it's great. It gives you that feeling of speed, when
you go fast, and that's the thing with the Switch and with Nintendo. Nintendo's big one is, of course, of Mario Kart. And that's fun. It's a great game. It's a lot of fun, but you don't get that feeling of speed from it. You're not racing super fast cars. You're racing karts. The whole point is that it's like go-karts. Yeah. So it's not quite the same, but that's a great suggestion for sure.
I'll tell you, speaking of karts, there was, there was one game we made, Kart Precision Racing, that was a racing game. It was for kart championship auto racing teams. And that was a game that was truly just a simulator, but it was so realistic. The physics were so accurate. I remember Blundell, what was his name? Michael Blundell, I think, was the racer. He also did some open wheel stuff, but other open wheel tournaments. But the kart was it was a simulation, but it was marketed as a game. It should have been marketed to the people that like Microsoft Flight Sim, if you will, like that. If you like Microsoft Flight Sim, you'll love Kart Precision Racing. It should not have been marketed like a Daytona Racing or
right.
or a pole position 14. But because I would say on some of the games, if you get too realistic in the physics and the handling of them, they become less fun, less of a game, and the replayability goes down as well. So it's just kind of a weird balance when you're talking about how realistic or how fast or something really feels. Well, if it really felt realistic, you probably wouldn't play it anymore.
Yeah, it'd be more of a job than a game.
Well, it's kind of boring. Yeah, it's like, that's how it feels when I drive every day.
Exactly. I got to go to work. Why do I want to do this?
Holy shit! This guy's taking Roy off the grid! This guy doesn't have a social security number for Roy!
So the next email came from Jason. It says, listening to your podcast, and I'm really enjoying it. In episode 3, you asked people to email you the games they would love to see remade. The 3 games from the 90s that I would love to see remade are Aerobiz Supersonic, Ogre Battle, and Rock and Roll Racing. Thank you for the great podcast. Hope you and your loved ones are safe and healthy during these uncertain times. So first off, I want to say that I'm safe and healthy, and Smitty is just healthy. He's very unsafe.
I'm not mentally healthy. I'm physically healthy, but yeah, I'm still relatively safe. And Dan, are you safe?
Yeah, I am safe. Yes, absolutely.
I haven't really had anybody, thankfully, in my family directly affected medically by the pandemic and the different things our world has been dealing with over the last few months, especially even over the last few weeks. But so I can say, thankfully, health side of it all. In fact, I think we were just talking at the beginning. I actually was tested for antibodies for the SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, which that's COVID-19, which it is a SARS virus, and no antibodies present. I was almost for sure I had it back in January or December. But once again, it's one of those things, not to be strange here, but to actually know the truth, it really helps me in a lot of ways, because you start thinking, did I have it? Am I immune? Could I get it again? I felt like this. What if I feel like this again? Like nowadays, just to be able to know one or two answers for fact is so liberating. So yes, thanks for all the emails and inspiring great conversation. And my response is always seek the truth.
Okay.
Well, the truth is, you wanted Aerobiz Supersonic,
yeah.
Ogre Battle and Rock and Roll Racing to be remade.
Oh well, the truth is they're not going to get remade.
Yeah.
That is the truth. That is the truth.
That's the truth.
Of those, the only ones I played was Aerobiz, and I did enjoy that game. I mean, when you think about it, there's a lot of older games that could go with a remake. And I guess really the only question is, do people, it's almost the same thing you guys face when choosing the games you release. Like, is there an audience for it? That's really what we're trying to determine here, right? Any of these games, they have nostalgic value for us because you played them when you were younger. So the question is, what's worth remaking and what isn't, right?
Yeah.
Well, and then goes back to what is remaking. Is it making a physical version to collect it, or are you improving it? There's a lot of a lot of things.
There's a question about that as well.
It's a really wide kind of thing to it's a broad scope to examine. The next one came from Bradley here. Bradley says, "Good afternoon, Erik. Loving the podcast. It is excellent. A big remake dream for me would be Commander Keen. Pretty sure Smitty's checked that out, played that. An updated side-scroller not far off from the original, but with quality of life updates for sure. Have a number of memories burning out my eyes late at night to that. Also, I know it has been out on everything, but I want a new updated horror-centric version of Heiankyo Alien. I have always loved the puzzle feeling of that game, but want to be terrified by the aliens escaping holes and chasing the player. Keep up the good work, both on the podcast and at SRG. Thanks for everything." So yeah, Commander Keen. How many of those were there? There was a bunch of them made, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure on that. But the good news is, Commander Keen, we are currently remaking it with an eye-burning device. So that guy it's going to be amazing. They're going to be for sale soon. Just keep coming back to our website. I'm almost positive I'm not lying to you. Okay, I'm lying to you. But if I did, I'd have to make it with an eye-burning device. I was just thinking about that behind a monitor the other day. Like some of these old games like Commander Keen that you set in front of a CRT monitor just burning your eyeballs. Like literally when you say that, it doesn't almost have a modern-day reference even, because we have these nice cool LED screens that aren't, literally shining a flashlight into our retinas. Especially, and you want to play games in the dark? Hell, half the programmers I know had to have no lights in their office.
Exactly, because the CRTs were more than enough.
Number one, they sat wherever you put them because they weighed 422 pounds. But yeah, they were just like a go look at a CRT. It actually looks like the projection of a flashlight, from one side to the other, which is exactly what it was.
Very much. The first Commander Keen was released back in December 14th of 1990 on DOS.
Oh my gosh.
So that takes you back quite a bit. And then get this.
I was in first grade.
Now get this. The latest announcement, June 9th, 2019 at Bethesda's E3 conference, they announced a Commander Keen for iOS and Android devices. So how far have we come on that sort of thing,
Yeah, and that's kind of a common thing you see. A lot of older games get a release of some kind on iOS because it's like the cheapest way to go, and it's probably got some sort of internal microtransactions or in-app purchases or whatever freemium content they can come up with.
To be able to jump 2 more times, please pay us 99 cents.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. That's what I hate about the mobile games, but yeah, that's I've seen that a couple different times for older games.
Yeah,
it is really cool.
It's a shame.
It's great to hear everybody's different wish list, though.
We got a voicemail from Dalton.
You have one New message. To listen to your messages, for new messages, press 1. First new message.
Hey guys, just wanted to give you some of my suggestions for games that are in need of a remake or remastered. First one is Eternal Darkness that debuted on the Nintendo GameCube. Second would have to be the Fear trilogy that debuted on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. And last but not least, the Dead Space trilogy that also debuted on the Xbox 360 and PS3. I think any of these games are well deserving of 60 FPS, fix a lot of the textures that really didn't sit well with a lot of the players that played it all the way back in the day. I would absolutely love to see any of these games get that fresh coat of paint on them.
I like the way he puts it, fresh coat of paint.
That's true.
I think that's a good way.
True.
It's a good way of describing what is happening with these games. Certainly that's the case for Final Fantasy VII. You know, it just is a completely reskinned game so that it looks super new and up to date, but is largely the same story and the same content. So what was it? Eternal? I missed the
Eternal
first one
Darkness was the first one that he was talking about. Now, that was a GameCube release, and I found this to be interesting for a couple of reasons. The first was this is now, overall probably like the third, fourth, fifth horror game that we've heard somebody mention in the past. It seems to be like a recurring theme. A lot of people are really enjoying that genre.
Oh, it's a popular genre, but also people like the dated graphics kind of pull people out of it. You know, you don't get as into the game that was made 20 years ago because they're kind of pixely and not so interesting to look at. And so the newer ones, like the Resident Evil remake, definitely achieves that, right?
Yeah.
It's a newer game. It brings you into the game more, the better it looks.
And that makes a ton of sense. The other thing that I found interesting about this was GameCube era. And so this kind of ties directly into one of the things I've been doing personally with gaming. I have been trying to put together some old consoles that recently have had ways to connect to HDMI, because it's hard to get that nice clear picture out of that old composite thing. So one of these was the GameCube, and GameCube actually had some models had this really cool digital AV port. And a couple of companies have figured out how to create this little module that I'm holding up to show you guys. And it's takes that digital AV port and makes it out HDMI. Now, that HDMI wasn't even around when the GameCube was released, and Eternal Darkness came out in 2002. HDMI wasn't even thought of in 2002 yet. At least I don't think so. But it certainly wasn't around when the GameCube was released. And so I've been going through and putting together pieces of the GameCube to try to get this kind of all put together so that I can play some old GameCube games. And I always thought, this kind of game, you're right. If they had this nowadays reskin like they did with RE, it would be more immersive, right? It would plunge you into the game more. Right now, if you were to play it, you'd probably go, that's not as cool looking as I remember. In fact, this particular game was originally planned. Eternal Darkness was originally planned for the Nintendo 64, and then didn't quite make it on to that quite the way that they wanted, and came over to GameCube for development. But yeah, really good choices. Smitty, we have promised for a number of episodes that we would pick a winner and drop a little bundle on them.
Yes, we were going to have a contest that we make up the rules on the spot, and then pick a winner that we make up on the spot, that we randomly draw with no rules. Nobody needs rules for this, is what you're saying. This is a rule-less.
Anybody who submitted suggestions, anybody who responded to Eric's call,
I just wanted to
is entered to win. So all these people
Gotcha.
are entered to win, including Dalton with that voicemail. So how do we choose a winner?
So I'll tell you what, if I throw that in and we look at this, I would say just pick a number between 1 and 11.
12,002. Oh, 11.
That's not how that works. Just pick a number between 1 and 11.
1.
1. So we are going to reach back out to Justin. Justin was the first person back in late April to go ahead and send us a message.
Wow. Oh, gee.
I will reach out to Justin and notify Justin via email. But yeah, we'll send Justin a nice little prize package, and maybe Justin can let us know and post some pictures on Twitter or something once Justin gets that. That'd be a nice share.
And, just as a hint, we have all kinds of things. We have overruns of stickers, instruction booklets. We have patches. We have static clings. We have different things that we do for different reserves that we might have,
Flat
small
boxes.
accessory bundles of. Flat boxes, flat jacket covers, unnumbered versions of games, numbered versions of games.
Scrap paper of notes that Smitty's taken and almost threw away.
We always have a lot of great things. We have a great team. We're always making a lot of different assets. We have a lot of different pieces of art around. So if you're a collector of art, we might have good prizes for you here.
So, Justin, by the time you hear this, I will probably have already reached out. Congratulations on winning our little tiny prize package. I promise you guys we will be doing more of this in the future. We love to engage with you guys and hear your feedback. Again, don't forget, you can email me, Erik, E-R-I-K, at specialreservegames.com. And then, Dan, tell them how they do the Anchor message voicemail thingamabobber.
It's just in the show notes of every episode. Now, you may not be listening to this podcast on Anchor, but you do need to have the Anchor app in order to respond via voice. So you could find this. You can just search Games You Deserve on the Anchor app, find the podcast, and then in the show notes, you'll see a link to record a voice message for us. And as you can hear, they sound great. I love it. I love the quality. It's not just like a phone message. It's actually recorded off of somebody's smartphone, so the quality of audio is excellent.
Believe it or not, George isn't at home. Please leave a message at the beep. I must be out before I pick up the phone. Where could I be? Believe it or not, I'm not home.
We have one more voicemail to listen to, and this one doesn't have anything to do with any remakes. It was just a genuine question from one of our listeners, and let's give it a listen, and then you guys can respond to it.
I'd just like you guys to talk about what led you to the decision to only make 500 copies of your next release. You just sold thousands of copies of Hotline Miami, and Mother Russia Bleeds has some crossover with this game. They're both violent, they're both dark, they're both fun. Now you have a larger customer base, but you're limiting how many people can buy. I understand PS4 doesn't sell as well across the limited game companies, but 500? That just seems silly. And the amount that you're allocating to limited run is 1,500, but they're not the same. And collectors who want to buy both of them are going to be struggling to get what they want. I know you've already said you're only doing 500, but man, please just reconsider. You're just doing a disservice to yourself, to the community that you've built. It's just kind of an unfortunate thing. You guys are doing so good right now. Your company appears to be growing, and I want it to continue to grow, and I want to be a part of that.
Well, I will tell you, there is always a decision on how many copies to make on anything when we're doing a set number.
3.
It's always based on 3. But, and that's the answer. I mean, I don't know how clear I can be. No, when we're talking about some of the older games that we're actually getting to do a physical version of now, there is a school of thought here by doing an open pre-order is kind of detrimental to the game and the potential sales of it, and maybe even the audience on the value that's put on it, if they're going to actually remember this game after 2 or 3 years. And so there's an idea that if it's taken 3 years to get it out on physical, if you did an open pre-order for, say, 20 or 30 days, there's not going to be any urgency to actually go and buy it. And half of the people who would really want it will most likely forget to actually buy it. Believe it or not, that's really an answer. That's not me saying that. That's customers saying that to me. And then there's also a value of the title itself, where you have, say, in Nintendo Switch, you have a game that has to be sold for $29.99 as a mandated MSRP for physical. Well, if you have the exact same game for PS4, that it's the same game, just a different platform, does it make it any less valuable And I say no. So the game would also sell on the, as far as I'm concerned, a reserve that would be a PS4 version is what you call price parity, or you'd have price parity. It's also $29.99 or $39.99. So at that point, you also have to build a lot of assets to make sure that the value of that digital game that you might be able to download for $6, has a great physical value. So all that has to be taken into consideration to what we call COGS, cost of goods. And you just kind of have to balance off your COGS on how many you might think you could be able to sell, but also how many items that you're willing to produce the assets, like stickers or patches or art cards or anything like that. We have to design and print all that stuff so far in advance to have it ready anywhere close to a time that we'd like to sell and ship it. So we have to risk and lay out a lot of money as well that we just can't recoup if we don't sell things. So there's a lot of risk versus sales potential, I guess, on some of this. But more than anything, I think we look at numbers of how do we maintain the value of these titles once they've been sold. Not like we're trying to make it easy for eBay to make a 100x markup on these games in the secondary market. It's not that. It's that if you buy something, you really know that it's limited. We really weren't lying. That's not it's not a marketing ploy. We think making a set number of games and leaving it at that is kind of representative of what not how much the game's value, but we want to preserve the value of that digital game in a physical state. So in a case where we've announced Mother Russia Bleeds for PS4, we announced 500 units for PS4 for us and 1,500 units for an alternate cover with Limited Run Games. And truthfully, Limited Run Games has a more active PS4 collector audience than we do. And so it makes sense for them to have some more of those units. The only reason we agreed to even do Mother Russia Bleeds PS4 is that we could collectively sell a few thousand, not a few hundred, or we wouldn't have probably made it. But Nintendo Switch outsells PS4 5-1. Easy, across the board, just 5-1. So every time you sell one PS4, you've already sold 5 Switches. So I wouldn't make the same number of Switches that I would PS4, even though they have price parity. They might have the exact same contents inside the box, other than one's a PS4 and one's a Switch. So it's kind of two different audiences. Same game, two different audiences, PS4 audience and Switch audience. And those aren't always the same people.
He's talking about somebody, I assume he's one of these people that would buy both versions as a collector, right? So that there is that's the issue I think he's trying to address here.
And he definitely has a point, and we definitely know about those people. We love those people.
I am one of those people.
Yeah, hell, I'm one of those people. But that's also still, that's like a niche group of a niche group, right? And so it's hard to kind of gauge what that's like. And then you talked about 5-1. That number is widening all the time. Yeah, there's
different ways that we are trying to sell, and we never are trying to put anything under because even for like Mother Russia Bleeds, we announced 500 as PS4, and there was an immediate outcry, and it wasn't just the 5 guys who love PS4 yelling the loudest. It was the 500 guys who love PS4 yelling really loud, kind of just like this voicemail. So thankfully, we announced early enough that I'm not locked into any manufacturing, specific manufacturing quantities. So because of the immediate feedback, we are going to increase the Mother Russia Bleeds PlayStation 4 run for Special Reserve Games to 1,000 units instead of 500. So we're going to double the amount. And that may not sound very big, like whoop-de-doo, that's going to sell out in 7 minutes instead of 3 minutes. It's a significant increase in the PS4 side. So I hope everybody that wants it on PS4 has an opportunity to get it. If you want to get it on Switch, I hope you have an opportunity to get it, and buy them both if you like. But if you are a supporter of PlayStation 4 and you want to see more physical games, appear on that platform in higher quantity numbers, especially by us. I mean, really, the only way to do that is just to buy the stuff that's put out on PS4, and all of us, limited run games, we will get more confidence, in the, not that the platform will sell, but it has the capability of selling closer back to what Switch is selling now. So I know that's a really crazy business laced answer, but that's really the, we started out with PlayStation 4 and PC at Special Reserve Games. We became a publisher, a co-publisher for Switch along the way. We started out PS4, so I love that platform a lot, and I hope at PS5 we get to start making more disc-based products.
Agreed. And don't forget, you guys can, using that voicemail, you can send other questions. Feel free to let us know, what other things you might want to know about. Definitely shoot us messages, and, hopefully we can put you on the podcast. So we appreciate all of the responses you guys have been given. Thank you.
Listen, you ignorant frickholes. Let's get real. Really real. Press conferences are a thing of the past. Most companies aren't even doing them anymore. I've got something better.
Oh, balls. You're not talking about your video project again, are you, Linda?
Sure as toots I am, Don. Sure as Emmer effing toots.
Video project?
We've been leaning on these expensive live shows for far too long.
It's been like 2.
Putting on these huge masturbatory shows to feed the egos of frickhole marketing suits and failed, air quotes, marketing directors. Why not we take the message right to the mother-loving community? Why not mainline it, Why not skip the criminy, bull hockey, sons of biscuits and go right to the public with
a video?
Sure as sticks of video. A marketing video so distilled people overdose on purchase intent before it's even over. I'm talking heroin up a butt levels of marketing.
This is the week that E3 would have happened in 2020. Now, of course, the event was canceled pretty early on in the COVID-19 pandemic. All live events are still canceled. It's still not acceptable to be holding huge events like E3. But, well, I mean, it sucks, but we want people to be safe, right?
I'm booing COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, it's worth talking about. We don't have an E3 this year to, of course, tell us all the new stuff coming out. But I know you guys have had some experiences with E3 in the past.
Well, I would have been at E3 right now. I mean, I would absolutely be in Los Angeles with quite a few people, right down at the corner of Pico and Figueroa, right across from the Staples Center. Because even last year I was there, the year before, but never exhibit inside of the E3 hall. I always set up shop at the Devolver booth, and way back when in the Gathering of Developers booth, which has never really been inside the confines of E3 proper, but just right across the street. So yeah, it is kind of strange because this is the kind of year where, this is the time of year when we catch up with old colleagues, that especially OGs that we haven't seen in years and years. Where did somebody go? Did Dan get a new job? Oh, I heard Eric's working at Sony now. All that stuff still happened and would still be happening now. And, it's not as much about the parties anymore as it is the connections, and not everything is now revealed at E3, kind of like it used to be, thanks to the internet, basically. But it still exists in people's mind. There's still a lot of announcements and virtual announcements, digital press releases, digital press conferences being done around the same time frame, because this time of year is oddly so ingrained in the psyche of not just the game developer, the gaming business, that, the first couple of weeks of June, that's E3 time. And it's still strange that E3 has been canceled for months, but everybody's marketing plans were still geared around this few weeks in June, and a lot of them are sticking to it.
When was the first time you went to E3?
1998. I mean, my first E3 was 1998. It was in Atlanta, Georgia. And in the early days of E3, it wasn't always in LA. It was going to bounce back and forth every other year. Atlanta one year, LA the other year, back and forth. And then I'm sure let's, no disrespect to Atlanta, but I mean, if you're going to put Atlanta up next to Los Angeles, it's going to be tough, because there is a lot of cool stuff out in LA. Number one, the Pacific Ocean. But so Atlanta isn't even on the Gulf Coast, so anyway, it was 1998. I was at Terminal Reality, and we were getting ready to try to launch Gathering of Developers. We were actually really trying to find an investor, a big powerful industry partner. And I remember we took a Cessna 172 that I had taken the shell of a Cessna 172 that's an airplane, and we had a flight simulator called Fly that we had developed at Terminal Reality, and it was going to be published by the new Gathering of Developers. We also had a game. Well, we had a demo called the Bullet Time demo out there. That was Max Payne. And then we had a Nocturne engine that we were demoing, and that turned out to be Nocturne. So anyway, that was 1998, Atlanta, Georgia.
No, wait. I just realized something. So this is 98. This is before the Matrix came out. The bullet time thing was a thing before the Matrix? Was it Max Payne that? Max Payne did that, the slow down of time and that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, I never realized that.
Mm-hmm.
Because certainly the Matrix is what popularized that in pop culture, right? But
the Matrix came out in 99, so that's right before that.
It was, but the technology existed, so it was a really amazing technical demo. Like I think part of what Remedy, and those are the developers of Max Payne from Helsinki, Finland, they were looking for advice and guidance, and E3 was a place to go where you had the smartest people, the most active people in the gaming industry really did gather there, because this was, I don't even know how the origin of E3 started, why it came to Atlanta and things like that. So I can't speak to some of the ESA and how that grew that's behind E3, but they, GDC and a couple, now PAX is different, but like GDC now is known as the business, where you get business done. And it's kind of not boring, but it certainly doesn't have the flash and the cash of E3. E3 is where you went to see the big crazy stuff get announced in a big crazy way. And that's changing. E3 was a great idea, and then when it went to Hollywood, it freaking went to Hollywood. You know what I'm saying? It became Hollywood, and it became the price of Hollywood too. It's very expensive.
And that's part of the reason why why Devolver has their booth outside. Well, it's way cheaper.
Absolutely, because it was, you didn't have a choice. You were told how much you were going to pay to be able to participate in E3. You had no choice. They would look at your gross revenues and charge you appropriately. And then let's say we did want to pay to play, and we said, here, we're God Games, and we're going to give you $1 million, to get inside that show floor, which, trust me, there's much more than that spent. And they said, well, that's cool. We'll take your $1 million, but since your first year, we're going to still put you way back in North Hall, where nobody else is. And you're like, what? Oh, and then door, done. So like, it was just, it didn't feel very fair to any of us who were in the industry, and Gathering of Developers was all about kind of bucking the system and taking it to the man, if you will, where the big money that was crushing and the artist and stealing their ideas a little bit, taking the credit for their ideas and putting their logo on it. That's what we were fighting to stop. We were going for developer-driven publishing. That was the credo of God Games. So E3 was also very important for us because we were out there on credit cards paying for the booth rent. That is the 1 year that, that we paid the ESA. I don't even know if it was the ESA at the time, to actually have floor space. But we were out there fishing so hard for investors. That's where we had people from England and Australia and Japan and everybody all come into this one town, to to meet. So we were really trying to fund gathering of developers really extremely hard. And E3 gave the opportunity to have all these people face to face. You get to see live demos of the games. You get to shake people's hands and see if you can trust them by looking them in the eye. Those were the opportunities that the early E3 afforded. And we actually did get funded at that E3. Gathering of developers became real.
Yeah, I got a chance to go the year after that Smitty had his first year. It went to E3 in '99, so this was back in LA at that
winner.
point.
I'm the winner first.
Anyway. Were you at the '99 one as well, Smitty?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course he was.
So you guys were there at the same time, but you didn't know each other yet?
No. I would have kicked his ass.
You may have crossed paths. Walking past each other.
I would have just kicked his ass.
You would have had to have gotten through security. 99, I was very famous.
Sure. You were the security back then. No, 99 was a great year for E3. You got to remember, though, that back then, this was all industry. This wasn't fan attended.
Yeah, you're right.
You got a chance to see something. And if you think about where gaming was 98, 99, 2000, 2001, that era, we were past the Nintendo. We were past the Super Nintendo. N64 was out. All these kind of what we called next gen consoles. We were starting to see 3D really.
Don't forget about PC. AMD had just put out the Athlon processor. You had a Pentium 1.5.
Yeah, this was big deal. I mean, in '99. You had my favorite story for that one was the Nintendo 64 itself was getting ready to drop this partnership game for Star Wars Episode 1 pod racing, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
The movie, regardless of what you thought of the prequels, one of the coolest things about it was the pod race, right? And
it's a good scene. It is.
Of all the video games that came out attached to Episode 1, the pod racing game is easily the best one of all of them. And at the time, Nintendo had partnered with LucasArts to kind of set up this massive booth specifically for this game. And they had built using kind of replicas of the pods that were in the films. They had built a stage where you could go up, sit inside one of these pods, and play the game on a big screen. So, of course, I'm getting in line. I want to do this. I want to pod race on the giant projection screen as if, I'm actually racing, because who wouldn't want to do that? So I get in line, I sit down, and while I am there's this big pomp and circumstance going on kind of behind. I don't know what's going on. I'm just racing, and whatnot. And up comes like this crowd surrounding this kid. Well, it turns out the kid that played little young Anakin, so Jake Lloyd, also from Indiana, he steps up and they want to do a photo op of him sitting in the pod playing the pod racing game while we're doing this. So I'm sitting in a pod next to him while they're doing the photo op, and he's playing, he's a kid. He wants to play the game. So he's playing the game a little bit. And then, of course, the smile for the camera kind of thing. And of course I beat his ass.
Of course you did.
I
won.
won.
And you won a Turbo Man in the process.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, this was like an amazing time. But you have all of these. You talked about the Hollywood of what E3 became. And really, that's when you stepped inside the larger halls. That's what you had. You had this over-the-top production with these one-off builds of signs and displays that they were just going to toss.
And
after
they would
this
fire their speakers at each other. They would try to out loud the other booth. Like, I'm louder than you. And it was so loud that even on the show floor, you were like, hey, do you have a meeting room? And so one of the side effects of all this Hollywood glamorization of the show floor is quiet meeting room spaces being built out on the show floor became actually part of your important build out. And so then when you would go, and then that started the tradition of the JP Marriott, the Marriott, becoming a hotbed for meetings to take place
away from all of this,
away off site for sure. And in fact, a couple of years ago, I was out there when we were starting Special Reserve Games, and I met with SIEA. I was meeting with Sony, and they had their meeting rooms at across the street at I think it was at the Marriott, if I'm not mistaken. It was at one of the hotels, and they just is good for them, right? Because they can have all their corporate executives. There are some high value people, high value targets, like we say there, that need security and whatnot. You can secure that a lot better in that hotel, and then they can. Everyone comes to them, for the meetings and stuff. But that's actually really cool. It becomes a badge of honor, by the way, to be able to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Erik, I have to leave the line for the Pod Racer game because I have a meeting with Sony across the street at the JP Marriott." That's
don't forget to lift your pinky when you say that.
Well, and I'll tell you what, and then you go across the street to get into the meeting, and they give you like a special colored wristband, or they do something like that. Well, you wouldn't take it off because then you got to go back across the street, and people are like, "Oh, you're," well, yeah, people think you're important.
We got to get going.
No, stick around, hang out with us.
Cool. Yeah, we'll stay and hang around with us. With Alice Cooper.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
A lot of the things that fans heard about and saw in pictures and video of the early days was based on that kind of battle. You talked about cranking up the speaker sound, but it wasn't just that. This is exactly why things like booth babes came up. This is exactly why freebies would come up. You'd want to get your thing to be the most attractive. You want that attention. So you would do anything and everything to try to draw that, free discs of stuff. Hell, they gave away Dreamcasts.
Well, but then the following year, you had to top what you did, and then you had to top what everybody else did. And that became a thing. Like, that wasn't a gathering. We were kind of, in my opinion, we set the standard for what could be done across the street, because we did have booth babes. We did have people dressed up in characters, but we gave away barbecue and keg beer, and we flew a bunch of bands in, like the Flame Trick Subs from Austin, Texas, with Satan's Cheerleaders as their backup dancers, and just the way you'd see them at Stubbs in Austin is exactly the way you saw them at Pico and Figueroa, and so that's what we're like, hey, let's throw a party. And so we called our place Hell, Texas, and so we just renamed that little corner Hell, Texas. And so it's the same kind of concept, but that's what we thought. If you're going to throw a big party, throw a party. Don't make it a weird, whatever's going across the street, So we just never really embraced that model, but we sure appreciated the gathering of minds and creatives that always did attend E3, and it still does, still would. I'm not saying it's dead, but it's just changed over the years. And things like PAX, and then you don't just have PAX anymore. You now you have PAX East, PAX West, PAX South. You used to have just one PAX. There used to be GDCs. Now you have GDC. There's a San Francisco GDC. There's a New York GDC, and then there's So not everybody goes to one show anymore, is what I'm saying. You can get business done differently.
And boy, that just gets expensive over time, doesn't it?
And honestly, as a game developer, we always geared our development cycles up so we would have hopefully a beta, something that was going to be on its way to Gold Master. Well, we had to, because you had to give press demos at that point. And this is like Blues News and GameSpot, and I can't remember if IGN was a thing back then, but there were very few even really credible news sites, like Computer Gaming Monthly Magazine, PC Gamer Magazine. And, by the way, if you want to have a weird Star Wars thing that you were just talking about, talk about PC Gamer Magazine. Who was the editor-in-chief? Gary Whitta. Oh, yeah. What did Gary Whitta do? Oh, yeah. He went on to write Rogue One. So just FYI, he was a British dude, so he was one of the writers of Rogue One. But it's, the magazines, just anybody that remembers how magazines used to work, and they still do, they don't print immediately. They usually come out about 30 days after. So, let's say today, is June 1st. Well, you couldn't prove it until, 30 days later would be when it comes out, no matter what, because it's printing and distribution. So we would have to make a game, have a demo that was kind of make or break over those few days, where we had press interviews scheduled back to back to back to back every 30 minutes. Like, shout out to Andy and Lori and all the people back that used to do our PR. But we would just be scheduled as developers for 3 days straight. It was unrelenting. So you had just spent probably the last 2 months killing yourself doing grinding, late night, ruining marriage type of business, type of hours in the office to get that alpha to beta, or get that beta to a gold master candidate or something, so you could go sell it to a publisher, so you could go get good press reviews, so you could do any kind of business you wanted. And then any of the impact from what you had, especially press, wouldn't even be felt for at least 30 or 45 days until after E3 the earliest.
In fact, what I know from people that I've talked to over the years that had a lot of the same experience, the most popular 2 weeks to set up a vacation outside of Christmas was the 2 weeks after E3.
After. And we still do that to this day.
Yeah.
That is exactly. But now here's the difference. In 1999, when we used to take it off, well, me, Doug, we would, rent a yacht and go straight out in the middle of the ocean for a week and then turn around and drive back for the next week. It didn't matter. We would do whatever. We were enjoying life. Now we're all taking our children out there who are 16, 17, 18. We've got some of the kids in our group are 25 now. And so now what we do is we go out to E3, and our families either go with us sometimes or will eventually meet us out there. Then we take the vacation after, like on our way home, if you will, from LA to wherever we're going, and we turn it into a family vacation now. So I usually end up in Colorado, which I just absolutely love Colorado, because it's kind of halfway home, and my daughter and I'll go and, kick around in Durango or Pagosa Springs or something like that. And so, yeah, it's still done to this day. Just like we said, E3 isn't happening this year for the first time in 2 decades, but the industry still coalesces around these dates as important to, and we don't know quite why. It's almost like Christmas, it's December 25th just because it always has been.
Well, no, we're seeing a lot of companies adapt to this, what they keep calling the new normal. And, we've already talked about not being a fan of that phrase. But we are seeing announcements and releases from gaming companies around titles that are going to be coming out in the next few months. Certainly, this pandemic has not necessarily been a bad thing for video games. A lot of people are staying in and playing and buying games. But do you think this is going to affect next year's E3 in that case? So all these companies didn't have to spend a bunch of money this year to go and to set up their stuff. Are they going to think twice before doing it next year or in future years if their campaigns are effective?
That's already started, right? We already saw Sony pulling out of E3. And we've already seen signs of Nintendo slowing down. We've seen signs of Microsoft slowing down. Smaller companies are not going anymore.
Well, Sony's not going anywhere for the whole year. Like it's not just E3. It's
was
all
that before
events.
the COVID-19 thing happened?
It was, but I think this just kind of puts the nail in that coffin. I think that may be something they don't ever do again.
Well, and and in this situation where it's not, there are so many negatives that we can all easily see about any of this just coming to a screeching halt. But it's also going to be a great positive in the way that, to use it. I'm going to use this reimagined. There's going to have to be a reimagining of, number one, what is the purpose of E3? And then realigning, hopefully, what E3 can become again, because right now it's a show that used to happen. It's a show that I remember. It's not a show that's coming up, just like many of the other shows. So I think there's two battles. One is you're going to have to try to regain the business excitement element of what E3 was, just in how it's presented by these other opportunities that other companies are seeing of how they can present to the mass public through online or whatever. But the other is you're going to have to make people, well, you're going to have to hit it at a time where people feel safe to travel, because let's just say E3 was back on August 1st, like GDC had actually announced an August date. You know, they were calling it the summer, GDC summer or whatever. And trust me, no one's booking flights, you know, no one's booking flights to go. And by the way, there's about 1/5 of the flights going into California now that there used to be anyway. And, you know, so you got the Airbnb people who are going upside down. There's less places to stay. You know, they didn't build more hotels during the COVID-19. So you're going to have like this combination of very strange logistical problems to even allow E3 to happen again, because everything around it, the support infrastructure of the city is so changed and altered forever in some cases. But yeah, I think the biggest is going to be the mental barricade that I would say half of the industry, when you've got literally half the people at E3 that come from overseas, they're not just in America, they're coming from Wuhan, China, they're coming from London, England, you know, to know that they are going to be able to travel out of the country, come back into their country, not quarantine for 14, you know, just all kinds of weird things at play. So there's no answer, but the two answers are they have to recapture the business purpose of E3, and then you're going to have to actually capture the right time that people that attend would feel safe to attend, whatever that even means.
Previously, I covered some of the more weird and wacky endeavors that Hiroshi Yamauchi explored during his early years leading Nintendo, from taxi service to instant rice to love hotels and copy machines. It seemed as though Nintendo was on an existential search for its own future. Real success, however, and the seeds of what was to become the electronic entertainment giant we know and love today were not necessarily to be found outside of their four walls. Thank you for coming back and listening to this week's new segment of Fireflower, From Paper to Pixels.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome when we live in our dream.
Did you know that on average there are over 80 Lego bricks for every person on Earth? Founded in 1932 by Ole Kirk Christensen, Lego had been a beloved toy for young and old alike. Also, much like Nintendo, their success has been undeniable. The Lego Group recorded over $4 billion in revenue in 2019, and they continue to partner with world-renowned IP, such as Harry Potter, Bob the Builder, Ghostbusters, Ferrari, DC, Marvel, and of course, Star Wars. Although the first Lego blocks were made of wood, in 1949, Lego began producing the interlocking plastic blocks that we are all familiar with today. This year, Lego is partnering with Nintendo on a new line of Super Mario Adventure sets with a unique feature. The Lego Mario figure will have an LCD screen in his eyes, mouth, and belly that will bring a new dimension to both Mario and Lego. But this isn't the first experience that Nintendo has with the wonderful world of interconnecting plastic blocks. Nearly everyone, it seems, has had a go at replicating the success of Lego and their famous blocks. In 1968, Nintendo released their own line of interlocking plastic blocks called N and B Block. If not the earliest, at least one of the earliest serious contenders to Lego. Nintendo's toy division created new and unique shapes with curves, often marketed as being superior to Lego's own blocks due to this fact. The N and B block sets were even mostly compatible with Lego blocks themselves, though the tolerances between the pieces were not as precise as what Lego produced, causing some of the bricks to fit together poorly at times. Nintendo released sets for nearly 4 years, including houses, animals, functioning clocks, and more. In fact, as I mentioned previously in an earlier segment to Fireflower, an N&B block version of Nintendo's Rabbit Coaster was released, giving you the opportunity to build the track that the rabbit slid down. There was even a Moon Rover set with landmines developed by Gunpei Yokoi, designer of the Ultra Hand. Ultimately, LEGO filed a suit against Nintendo, claiming that the N&B blocks infringed upon the LEGO product. However, Nintendo successfully defended N&B blocks by citing the unique block designs that they used to market the product. Although there were intriguing sets such as the train, coaster, gondola, and even a ringing bell, the line of blocks were discontinued in 1972. Though Nintendo no longer produces the blocks, they have made appearances within a few games. Super Mario Land 2 even has a level where some of the blocks that make up the stage are labeled N&B. During this same era, Nintendo began experimenting with electronic toys. In 1970, the Ella Conga electronic drum kit appeared on store shelves. Developed by, you guessed it, Gunpei Yokoi, the Ella Conga was essentially a basic 5-sound synthesizer and speaker in a small conga drum enclosure. Pressing each of the buttons on the top would produce a unique sound. There was an optional auto player attachment which connected to the Ella Conga via a cable. Each auto player came with a set of cardboard discs that would produce a series of inputs when spun around. In some ways, the Ella Conga is an early ancestor to the DK Conga drums from the GameCube era. It seems that 1970 was quite the pivotal year in Nintendo's history and quite the busy one for Gunpei. One of these developments came from a new partnership. The electronics company Sharp was developing a fairly new photosensitive component, commonly known as a photoresistor. At a basic level, there are 2 pieces of conductive metal separated by a small gap that's filled with a light-sensitive material. When enough light hits this sensor, it allows for more electricity to cross the gap. Masayuki Uemura, a sales engineer from Sharp, was looking to find ways to use the developing technology and met with Gunpei. Gunpei's creative approach to toys, combined with this new photocell, gave birth to the Kosenju SP series of light gun toys. The Kosenju SP sets commonly had a set of targets that contained photosensors and were compatible with both the handgun and rifle gun, both of which shot a beam of light at the target. When the photosensor was hit with the beam of light, the target toy would react in some way. Nintendo and Sharp's partnership was yet another smash hit, selling hundreds of thousands of units. Sharp and Nintendo would partner again in the 1980s, but that's a story for another time.
Well, that's going to do it for another episode of Games You Deserve. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to follow us on social media. If you haven't already, you can find links in the description below. For Smitty and Erik, I'm producer Dan. Until next time,
Game over.